Today, we're diving into the work of Stanford behavior scientist B.J. Fogg, and he basically argues that almost everything you and I have been taught about building new habits is wrong. So if making these huge, ambitious goals doesn't actually work, what does? You know the drill, right? We've all been there. You get super motivated, you set a massive goal, you're going to run a marathon, write a novel, completely transform your diet, and then a few weeks later, you're right back at square one. So what gives? Well, the reason might not be what you think. It's probably not a lack of willpower, but a flawed strategy from the very beginning. This super common cycle of failure comes from something we can call the big change trap. It's that whole go big or go home mindset, and according to Fogg, that's exactly where we go off the rails. I mean, this chart just captures it perfectly. We aim for this huge, inspiring goal, like running a marathon, but the immediate feeling it triggers is just overwhelm. We decide to write a novel, and we feel totally intimidated. We try to overhaul our entire diet, and we just end up feeling guilty when we slip up. See the pattern? It's this negative emotional loop that makes us give up, not some personal failing. And here it is. This is the idea that changes everything. The problem isn't you. It's not a failure of your character or your willpower. The method itself is broken. You've just been using the wrong playbook this whole time. Okay, so if the old way is busted, what's the alternative? Well, the solution is this beautifully simple concept Fogg calls the tiny habits method. So what exactly is a tiny habit? It's an action that is so small, it feels almost ridiculous. So instead of I'm going to work out for an hour every day, your tiny habit is I'm going to do 2 push-ups. Instead of I'm going to floss every night, it's I'm going to floss 1 tooth. The whole point is to make it so laughably easy that there's just no excuse to say no. So how does this actually work in practice? The whole process is really simple. You take that tiny little new behavior and you physically link it to something you already do automatically every single day. This existing routine, that's what Fogg calls an anchor. So the formula looks like this. After I do my existing anchor habit, I will do my new tiny habit. For example, after I brush my teeth, I will floss 1 tooth. The goal here isn't big, immediate results. It's about wiring the new behavior into your day by being super consistent. But just starting small isn't the whole story. There's a secret ingredient that, according to Fogg, is actually the most important piece of the puzzle. It's not about repetition. It's all about emotion. This quote gets right to the heart of it. Our brains don't actually form habits just because we repeat something over and over. They form habits because there's a reward. And in the tiny habits method, that reward isn't something external like a cookie. It's the internal, immediate feeling of success you get the second you complete the tiny task. Fogg even gives this feeling a name, and it's called shine. Shine is that little burst of pride, that heck yeah, I did it moment. When you do your 2 push-ups and then you immediately celebrate, even with just a little mental high five or a fist pump, you generate shine. That positive emotion sends your brain a little shot of dopamine, a reward that says, hey, that felt good, let's do that again. That's the thing that actually wires the habit in and makes it automatic over time. This idea totally reframes the entire process. Change isn't some epic test of your willpower. It's a practical skill, one you can actually learn and get better at with practice, just like anything else. Fogg's piano analogy explains this so perfectly. Think about it. You wouldn't try to learn piano by sitting down on your very first day and attempting some wildly complex Rachmaninoff concerto. Of course not. You'd get frustrated and quit almost immediately. You'd start with something incredibly simple, like Mary Had a Little Lamb. And that's the whole point. You practice the simple tunes and the daily scales to build the fundamental skill and, just as importantly, the confidence. It's only after you've mastered those basics that you can even think about taking on the more challenging pieces. It is the exact same thing with our habits. All right, so that's the theory, but what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's check out a couple of concrete examples straight from Fogg's work. This one is called Fogg's Maui habit. The anchor is your feet touching the floor in the morning, something you do every single day. The tiny habit is to immediately say, it's going to be a great day. It's such a simple way to set a positive trajectory for your entire day, right from the very first moment you're awake. And what's really fascinating here is that in a book that's packed with techniques for building literally any habit you can imagine, this is the only one Fogg specifically tells everyone to adopt. That just speaks volumes about how powerful this one little tone-setting action can be. Here's another really practical example, helping a kid build a reading habit. You can see the whole formula in action here. First, find a solid anchor. After we feed the dog, second, make the habit tiny. We will read just one sentence from a book. And third, and this is key, celebrate immediately. As soon as you finish, you say, good for us, to generate that feeling of shine and create this really positive vibe around reading. And all of this leads to a huge takeaway. It is way, way easier to start a new good habit than it is to stop an old ingrained bad one. So where should you focus your energy? On building small positive habits first. This lets you practice the skill of change. And once you get good at that skill and you build that confidence, you'll be so much better equipped to tackle the bigger, harder stuff down the line. And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important question. Because this isn't just some interesting theory, it's a practical tool you can use today, right now. So what's one ridiculously small action you could anchor into your routine, starting this very moment, that could begin a positive ripple effect in your own life?